Welcome, dear listeners. Tonight, we venture into a once vibrant kingdom shrouded in despair, where brave knight Aelric seeks a mysterious witch to uncover the invisible castle that holds the key to breaking an ancient curse. Find a cozy spot, close your eyes, and let the magic unfold as we journey into the witch and the invisible castle. In the heart of a once vibrant kingdom, where laughter had danced through the air like sunlight on rippling water, a somber veil had descended. The skies, once painted in azure hues, now brooded with heavy clouds that clung like memories of joy long forgotten. The castle, a majestic structure that had stood for centuries, now loomed ominously over the land, its turrets reaching into the grey expanse, echoing the deep sighs of a realm lost to despair. The villagers spoke in hushed tones, their faces etched with worry, as they went about their daily lives under the oppressive shadow of the curse. Children, who once played in the meadows, now wandered with vacant stares, their laughter muted as if the very essence of joy had been siphoned away. Crops withered under the unforgiving sun, and the once bountiful harvests had turned to dust. Whispers of an ancient curse, woven into the very fabric of the kingdom, snaked through the streets like an uninvited spectre. Among the denizens of this sorrowful land was a young knight named Aelric, with hair like spun gold and eyes that shone with an inner light. He was a beacon of hope amidst the gathering gloom. Clad in armor that glinted like stars in the night sky, he was driven not only by a sense of duty, but by a longing to restore the kingdom he held dear. He had grown up hearing tales of its splendor, of knights and heroes, of festivals that ignited the spirit. And now he felt the weight of that legacy pressing upon his shoulders. One evening, as twilight cast long shadows across the castle grounds, Aelric stood upon the battlements, staring into the distance where the forest met the horizon. It was there that he first heard the whispers, a soft, ethereal sound that drifted through the air, tickling his ears and tugging at the edges of his consciousness. They spoke of a witch, a mysterious figure said to dwell at the edge of the realm, cloaked in enigma and power. She was rumored to possess the ability to see what others could not, to unveil hidden truths and unlock the doors to forgotten secrets. As he listened, the whispers wove a tapestry of hope in his heart. Perhaps she held the key to the kingdom's salvation. The thought ignited a fire within him, a determination that surged like a tide. He turned from the battlements, his mind made up. He would seek the witch who could reveal the invisible castle that held the answer to their plight. The following morning, before the sun had fully breached the horizon, Aelric donned his armor, fastening the straps with resolve. With a final glance at the castle that had sheltered him all his life, he set forth into the unknown, the path winding before him like a ribbon of destiny. The forest loomed ahead, thick and ancient, its gnarled branches twisting toward the sky as if reaching for a freedom they could never grasp. The air grew thick with enchantment as he entered the woodland, the sunlight filtering through the leaves in dappled patterns, casting fleeting shadows that dance along the forest floor. The trees whispered secrets, their voices merging into a haunting symphony that echoed in the depths of his mind. Each step felt heavy with purpose, the earth beneath him pulsing with life and magic. As the day wore on, Aelric encountered peculiar sights. A deer with antlers that sparkled like diamonds, flowers that glowed softly in the twilight, and the distant sound of a river, its waters singing a song of ages past. But the deeper he ventured, the more he sensed the lingering remnants of the curse that hung in the air, like a shroud that clung to the very fabric of the world around him. After what felt like hours of wandering, he stumbled upon a clearing where the trees parted, revealing a sight that stole his breath away. At the center stood a solitary stone well, its surface worn and ancient, with ivy twisting around its edges like a lover's embrace. Water pooled at its depths, shimmering with an otherworldly glow. It was said that wells such as these were conduits to the past, holding the memories of those who had come before. Kneeling beside the well, Aelric peered into the depths, and for a fleeting moment he thought he saw a flicker of movement, a shadow darting just beyond his reach. "Is anyone there?" he called, his voice echoing through the stillness. The only reply was the rustling of leaves and the soft sigh of the wind. With a heart heavy with both hope and trepidation, Aelric knew that he must press on. The witch awaited him, and with her, perhaps the key to unraveling the ancient curse. He stood, resolved to continue his quest, the path before him twisting like the tales of old, leading him deeper into the forest's embrace. As the shadows grew longer and the sky darkened, he felt the weight of destiny upon his shoulders, a silent promise that his journey had only just begun. Night descended upon the land like a velvet cloak, shrouding the forest in an eerie stillness. Only the occasional rustle of leaves or the distant hoot of an owl broke the silence. But Aelric pressed forward, his heart guided by the faint whispers of the legends that had long intrigued him. They spoke of a place hidden from mortal eyes, an invisible castle that held the key to breaking the curse. But such tales were always tinged with shadows, warnings, unspoken dangers that seemed to cling to every word. As a child, Aelric had often listened wide-eyed to the elders recounting the tale. According to the legend, the invisible castle had once been a place of great power, a sanctuary for ancient kings who wielded magic as effortlessly as they did swords. But over time, the castle had faded from sight, vanishing into the folds of time as if swallowed by the earth itself. Some said it was still there, existing in a realm just beyond perception, waiting for the day when it would be needed once more. Many had sought it, and many had failed. The stories told of knights who ventured into the forest, seeking the castle's hidden gates, only to lose their way or never return at all. The invisible castle had become more of a ghost story, a whisper in the dark meant to stir fear in the hearts of those who dared to believe in it. And yet, Aelric's heart clung to the hope that the castle was not just a myth, but a reality waiting to be revealed. The path before him twisted like a serpent, leading deeper into the forest's embrace. The trees loomed larger now, their gnarled branches entwining overhead, casting a latticework of shadows that moved and shifted as if alive. The air had grown colder, and Aelric felt the weight of unseen eyes watching his every step. He had known the forest well as a boy, but this was different. This part of the woods felt otherworldly, as though he had crossed into a realm where the rules of reality no longer held sway. Suddenly, the air thickened with magic, palpable and heavy. A soft glow appeared in the distance, like the faintest glimmer of a starlight. It beckoned him forward, and without hesitation, Aelric followed. His steps quickened, though his heart pounded in his chest. The glow grew stronger as he approached, revealing the silhouette of an ancient tree, its roots deep and sprawling, twisting like the fingers of some forgotten titan. Beneath its massive trunk lay a stone slab, half hidden by moss and vines. It was then that Aelric heard it, the faintest murmur of voices, as if the very earth beneath the slab was whispering secrets of the past. He knelt beside the stone and placed his hand upon it. The moment his fingers brushed the surface, the voices grew louder, clearer. They were telling him something, though the language was lost to time. And then, in a flash of clarity, he understood. The witch alone holds the key. The witch he sought had powers beyond mere spells. She could see the unseen, unravel the mysteries that lay just out of reach. Aelric's heart raced. She was not merely a guide to the castle. She was its seer, the one who could pierce the veil that hid it from the world. But there was more. The voices whispered of trials, of sacrifices to be made. The invisible castle was not hidden without reason. Its magic was dangerous, unpredictable, and would test the worth of any who dared to seek its power. Rising from his knees, Aelric cast one last glance at the glowing stone before moving deeper into the forest. As he walked, the legends he'd heard throughout his life swirled in his mind, coiling like vines around his thoughts. Each tale had held a piece of the truth, fragments of a puzzle long unsolved. He realized then that the witch's guidance would be more treacherous than he had first imagined. Her eyes would see what he could not, but her path would be laced with riddles and deceptions, and the invisible castle itself would test him in ways beyond mere courage. Yet even knowing the dangers, Aelric pressed on. The glow behind him faded, but ahead the path became clearer, almost as though the forest itself was urging him forward, guiding him toward the witch. He could feel her presence now, a distant pull like the ebb of a tide, drawing him closer to the heart of the mystery. And so, the knight continued his journey into the depths of the enchanted forest, his mind heavy with the legends of the invisible castle and the enigma of the witch who would reveal it. In the distance, beyond the thick canopy of leaves, he swore he saw a flicker of movement, a shadow, or perhaps something more. With each step, Aelric knew that the boundary between legend and reality was beginning to blur, and his fate was entwined with that which remained unseen. The dawn broke slowly, creeping through the dense thicket of trees as if reluctant to touch the forest floor. Aelric, weary from his night's journey, could feel the pulse of the land beneath his boots, a slow, rhythmic thrum, like the heartbeat of the earth itself. The air had a weight to it, thick with the scent of moss and damp earth, and the whispers of the invisible castle seemed to cling to him like a forgotten dream. He knew the witch was near. The very fabric of the forest seemed to hum with her presence. The deeper Aelric ventured, the more the world around him changed. The familiar sounds of birdsong and rustling leaves faded into an eerie stillness, as though nature itself held its breath. The trees stood taller here, their bark gnarled and twisted as if shaped by unseen hands. Strange flowers grew along the path, their petals glowing faintly in the dim light. Some whispered his name as he passed, their voices thin and ethereal, like wind through a broken window. It was then that he saw it, a clearing, bathed in a soft, golden light that seemed to defy the gloom of the forest. In the center of the clearing stood a figure, cloaked in robes as dark as the night, and lined with silver thread that shimmered like starlight. Her hood was drawn low, concealing her face, but there was no mistaking who she was. This was the witch he sought, the one who could see the invisible castle that held the key to freeing his kingdom. Aelric approached slowly, his heart a steady drumbeat in his chest. As he drew nearer, the witch's head tilted slightly, as if acknowledging his presence without needing to look. Her voice, when it came, was a soft murmur, as though she was speaking not to him, but to the very air around her. "You seek what is hidden," she said, her voice like the rustle of dry leaves. "But what is hidden is not always lost." Aelric swallowed, his throat dry. "I seek the invisible castle, the one that holds the key to breaking the curse on my kingdom. I have been told that only you can see it." The witch raised a hand, delicate and pale, as though carved from moonlight. She beckoned him closer, and Aelric obeyed, stepping into the circle of light that surrounded her. Up close, the air around her crackled with magic. a faint shimmer that made the hairs on the back of his neck stand on end. "The invisible castle exists," the witch said, her voice distant, as though she was speaking from a place far beyond the clearing. "But it is not a place that can be found by the eyes alone. It is hidden in plain sight, shrouded in the desires and fears of those who seek it." Aelric frowned, confusion gnawing at him. "But how can I find it if I cannot see it?" The witch's lips curved into the faintest hint of a smile. "That is the question all who have sought the castle must answer. Many have tried. Few have returned." She lowered her hand, the light around her flickering like a dying flame. "To see what is unseen, you must first understand the nature of what you seek. The castle is bound to the heart, not the eye. It reveals itself to those who are prepared to face what lies within." Aelric's thoughts whirled. His heart was steadfast, driven by the love of his kingdom and the desire to see it freed from the curse. But something in the witch's words unsettled him, as though the task ahead was far more dangerous than he had imagined. "I am ready," he said, his voice steady, though doubt crept at the edges of his mind. The witch regarded him for a moment longer, her dark eyes glinting from beneath the hood. Then, with a slow, deliberate motion, she reached into her robes and drew out a small object, a vial of liquid shimmering in hues of silver and blue. She held it out to him, and the light around them dimmed as though the clearing itself were holding its breath. "Drink this when the moon is high," she instructed, her voice low. "It will give you the sight you need to see the castle. But know this, knight, what you see may not be what you expect. The castle is a reflection of your soul. Its doors will only open if you are prepared to confront the truths within yourself." Aelric took the vial, its weight surprisingly heavy in his hand. His gaze lingered on the swirling liquid inside, the colors shifting like the surface of a distant ocean. A strange unease settled over him, but he pushed it aside. He had come too far to turn back now. "Thank you," he said, his voice quieter than he intended. The witch nodded once, a slow, deliberate gesture. "When the moon is high," she repeated, before turning and vanishing into the shadows as though she had never been there at all. Aelric stood alone in the clearing, the vial clasped tightly in his hand. The path ahead was unclear, filled with mysteries and shadows, but one thing was certain. The invisible castle awaited him, and with it, the fate of his kingdom. As the sky darkened and the first stars began to twinkle overhead, Aelric knew his quest had truly begun. The moon rose high in the sky, casting its pale spectral light over the forest, bathing the world in a silvery glow. Aelric sat by the edge of a stream, the soft murmur of water the only sound breaking the silence of the night. In his hand, the vial the witch had given him gleamed faintly, its contents swirling with mysterious colours that seemed to pulse in rhythm with the beat of his heart. He could feel the weight of her words still lingering in the air, like the distant echo of a song half remembered. The castle is a reflection of your soul. The witch's cryptic message gnawed at him. How could a castle, a place of stone and mortar, of ancient walls and forgotten rooms, be tied to something as intangible as his soul? And what truths would it reveal about him that he had yet to confront? These thoughts plagued him, casting long shadows in his mind as the moon climbed ever higher, its light growing sharper, colder, as if it were urging him toward the moment of decision. When the moon reached its zenith, Aelric knew the time had come. With a deep breath, he uncorked the vial and brought it to his lips. The liquid was cool and sweet, sliding down his throat like a whisper of starlight. For a moment, nothing happened, and Aelric began to wonder if the witch had deceived him. But then slowly the world around him began to shift. The trees wavered in his vision, their outlines blurring like ink spreading across parchment. The soft babble of the stream grew distant, as though the water were flowing through time itself, pulling him with it. Colours bled into one another, twisting and merging until the forest was no longer the same. It was as if a veil had been lifted, and the world beyond sight now revealed itself to him. Ahead, where moments before there had been only trees and shadows, now stood the castle. It was unlike any structure Aelric had ever seen. Towering spires stretched impossibly high into the night, their stonework shimmering as if carved from the very fabric of the stars. The walls, once invisible, flickered with faint light, their surfaces covered in intricate symbols and runes that seemed to pulse with a life of their own. The castle was both magnificent and terrifying, as though it existed beyond the mortal realm, a place not meant for human eyes. Aelric stood transfixed, unable to move as the weight of its presence pressed down upon him. It was as if the air around the castle vibrated with ancient power, a force that tugged at his soul, urging him forward. And yet, something within him hesitated, a deep-seated fear that he had not anticipated. The witch's words echoed in his mind again. The castle is a reflection of your soul. Was he truly ready to face what lay within? As if sensing his hesitation, the air grew colder, a biting chill creeping through the forest, and Aelric felt the presence of the witch once more. She was not visible, but he could feel her watching from the shadows, her gaze piercing through the veil between worlds. You see it now? Her voice drifted toward him, soft and distant, like the wind through the trees. The invisible castle reveals itself only to those prepared to face their deepest truths. Aelric turned toward the sound, though he knew he would not see her. What do you mean by truths? What awaits me inside? The witch's voice was quiet, yet it carried a weight, that sent a shiver down his spine. The castle holds the key to your kingdom's salvation, but it is not a key made of iron or gold. It is a key forged from the essence of who you are, knight. Within its halls, you will confront the shadows of your heart, the fears you have buried, the desires you have hidden, even from yourself. Her words hung in the air, thick with meaning, and Aelric felt the weight of them settle on his chest. His heart pounded in his ears, and the cold night seemed to close in around him. "Will I have to fight them?" he asked. His voice hoarse, his hand instinctively gripping the hilt of his sword. The witch's laughter was soft, a sound like leaves rustling in the wind. "Not all battles are fought with blades, Aelric. The battles you face inside will be of a different kind. Battles of the soul, where courage is measured not by the strength of your arm, but by the strength of your heart." Aelric's hand loosened on his sword. He could feel his resolve wavering, the enormity of the task before him sinking in. This was not what he had expected. He had thought his journey would lead him to a simple quest: find the castle, retrieve the key, and save his kingdom. But now it was clear that the path was far more perilous, not because of any external foe, but because of the truths he would be forced to confront within himself. "Are you ready, knight?" the witch's voice whispered, her question lingering like a challenge. Aelric closed his eyes, steeling himself against the fear rising in his chest. He had no choice but to be ready. For his kingdom, for the people he loved, and for the salvation of his land, he had to face whatever the castle had in store. "I am ready," he whispered into the night, though his heart trembled with uncertainty. With that, he stepped forward, the shimmering gates of the invisible castle parting before him like the opening of a dream, revealing the dark unknown that awaited beyond. The air inside the invisible castle was thick with silence, a quiet so profound that it seemed to press against Aelric's skin, making every breath feel weighted. As he stepped over the threshold, the gates closed behind him with a soft, almost imperceptible whisper. He was alone, utterly alone in this strange place, where light and shadow danced like spectres in a world beyond his comprehension. The interior of the castle was vast, larger than it had seemed from the outside. The walls shimmered with a faint silvery glow, and the floor beneath his feet felt unnaturally smooth, as if it had been carved from a single, unbroken piece of stone. The air was cool, almost cold, and it carried a strange scent, a mixture of old parchment and the faintest trace of something floral, like flowers that had long since withered. As Aelric ventured deeper into the castle, he began to notice things that unnerved him. The corridors seemed to shift as he walked, their shapes warping subtly in the corner of his vision. He would glance back and find that the path behind him no longer resembled the one he had taken, as though the castle itself were rearranging its bones, testing him, guiding him towards something hidden deep within its heart. There were no torches, no lanterns lighting his way, but the walls pulsed with a strange, ethereal light, casting soft, wavering shadows that seemed to move of their own accord. Aelric could hear nothing but the echo of his own footsteps, yet there was a feeling, an eerie sensation that he was being watched, though he saw no eyes in the darkness. And then the whispers began. At first, they were faint, like the rustling of leaves in a distant wind. But as he moved through the twisting corridors, they grew louder, more insistent, as though they were not merely sounds but voices, fragments of something once spoken. They tugged at the edges of his mind, pulling him deeper into the labyrinth of the castle, where the very walls seemed to pulse with a life of their own. The whispers wove through the air, filling his thoughts with fragments of words, names, and forgotten promises. They did not seem hostile, but they carried a weight, a sadness that clung to him like mist. "Who are you, knight?" they seemed to ask. "What do you seek here?" Aelric swallowed hard, his grip tightening on the hilt of his sword, though he knew it would do little good against such formless things. His heart pounded in his chest, but he pressed on, determined to uncover the secrets the witch had spoken of. The key to freeing his kingdom was here, somewhere within the hidden recesses of this strange, impossible place. Eventually, the corridor opened into a grand hall. The ceiling stretched so high it vanished into darkness, and the walls were lined with enormous mirrors, their surfaces gleaming with a faint, ghostly light. Aelric paused at the entrance, unease prickling at the back of his neck. The hall felt wrong, too still, too quiet, as though it had been waiting for him. He stepped inside, his footsteps muffled by the sheer enormity of the space. The mirrors reflected his form back at him, but something was off. His reflection was not quite his own. In the glass, his armor gleamed brighter, and his eyes seemed to burn with an intensity that did not match what he felt within. And as he walked past each mirror, his reflection would linger for a moment too long, watching him even as he turned away. Suddenly, one of the mirrors flickered. Aelric stopped, staring at the glass. His reflection was gone. Instead, the mirror showed a scene, a memory, long buried but not forgotten. It was a battlefield, the sky dark with smoke and ash, and there in the midst of it was Aelric, younger, fiercer, his sword raised high, as he led a charge against an unseen enemy. His eyes burned with fury, and his voice echoed in the chamber, a battle cry filled with defiance and anger. Aelric's heart clenched as he watched the scene unfold. He remembered that day well. It had been one of his greatest victories, but the cost had been heavy. He had lost comrades, men who had trusted him to lead them, men who had fallen at his side, their faces still haunting his dreams. The reflection shifted, showing him their faces, one by one, as if the castle itself were pulling the memory from his soul and laying it bare before him. The whispers returned, soft and mournful. Is this what you seek, knight? The truth of your past, the weight of your choices? Aelric tore his gaze from the mirror, his breath coming in short, sharp bursts. His heart raced, but he knew he could not turn back now. The witch had warned him that the castle would show him the truths he had long buried, and this was only the beginning. The key to freeing his kingdom was hidden somewhere within these walls. But to find it, he would first have to face himself. Swallowing his fear, Aelric stepped forward, deeper into the Hall of Mirrors, knowing that each step brought him closer to the heart of the castle, and closer to the secrets that it guarded. The whispers followed him, their voices mingling with his own thoughts, and the air grew colder still. Ahead, another mirror flickered, casting a faint ghostly glow, and Aelric knew with a certainty that chilled him to the bone that the true trials were just beginning. The Hall of Mirrors stretched endlessly before Aelric, each reflective surface shimmering with its own faint spectral light. His breath hung in the cold air, condensing into a mist that seemed to dissipate far too quickly, as though the very air inside the castle devoured any warmth it could find. He moved forward slowly, his heart heavy with the weight of the memories the mirrors had forced him to confront. As he passed another mirror, it flickered once again. This time, the reflection did not show the battlefield or the faces of his fallen comrades. Instead, it revealed a scene far more intimate, far more painful. Aelric froze as the image before him sharpened into focus. He saw himself, years younger, standing at the gates of his village, saying goodbye to the one person he had loved most in the world, Aera. Her face, soft and filled with sorrow, stared back at him through the glass. He could hear her voice, pleading with him not to leave, not to embark on the path that had led him to the life of a knight. But he had been resolute then, driven by duty, by the need to protect his kingdom. He had turned away from her, leaving her standing in the dust, her heart breaking with each step he took. The reflection rippled, showing Aera's eyes brimming with tears, her lips moving silently, as if whispering words he would never hear again. The image cut deeper than any blade could, and Aelric felt the weight of it crushing his chest. He had buried the memory of her deep within himself, locking it away with all the other regrets he had accumulated over the years. And now, the invisible castle was dredging it up, forcing him to face the truth he had long avoided. The past will not be silenced forever, the whispers seemed to say, echoing in his mind. What you abandon in the name of duty may return to haunt you. Aelric clenched his fists, his knuckles whitening as the memory of that day unfolded once more. He had thought that leaving Aera behind was the only way to protect her, to keep her from the dangers of his chosen path. But now, Standing before the mirror, he questioned whether that decision had been made out of fear. Fear of vulnerability. Fear of what he might lose if he allowed love to take root in the midst of a world filled with war and chaos. The mirror flickered again, and this time it showed Ira's face. Older, more distant, the life they might have had together nothing more than a fading dream. She was gone now, lost to time, and Aelric had never been able to return to her. He had made his choice, and now the castle forced him to confront the true price of that decision. With a heavy sigh, he tore his gaze from the mirror, unwilling to let the past consume him any further. Yet, as he turned away, he could not shake the feeling that this trial, the trial of the heart, was far from over. He moved forward once more, his steps slower, more hesitant. The mirrors continued to reflect fragments of his life, moments of triumph and loss, love and sacrifice, each one a reminder of the person he had become, and the pieces of himself he had left behind. As he approached the end of the hall, a final mirror stood before him, larger than the rest, its surface dark and still, like the depths of a forgotten sea. Aelric hesitated, sensing that whatever lay within this mirror would reveal the most difficult truth yet. He took a deep breath, steeling himself, and stepped closer. The mirror remained blank for a moment, its surface smooth and unyielding. Then, slowly an image began to form. It was not a memory this time, but a vision, a future that had yet to unfold. Aelric saw himself standing before the throne of his kingdom, the castle restored to its former glory. The curse was lifted, and the land flourished under his rule. But there was something wrong with the image. Though his people cheered and the kingdom shone with newfound light, Aelric's reflection stood alone, his expression hollow, his eyes dim. There was no joy in his victory, no sense of peace. He had saved his kingdom, but in doing so, he had lost something far greater, himself. The realization struck him like a blow to the chest. The invisible castle was not just testing his courage or his strength. It was forcing him to confront the choices he had made, the sacrifices that had cost him his soul. He had dedicated his life to his kingdom, but in the process, he had severed his ties to everything that made him human: love, connection, vulnerability. The whispers returned, softer now, almost tender. What is a kingdom without a heart, knight? What is victory without the soul to cherish it? Aelric fell to his knees before the mirror, the weight of the truth pressing down upon him. His heart ached with the knowledge that he could not undo the past, but perhaps, just perhaps, he could still choose a different future. The key to freeing his kingdom was not only within the castle's walls, but within himself. He had to reclaim what he had lost, the part of him that he had abandoned in the name of duty. With trembling hands, he rose to his feet, his reflection staring back at him with new clarity. The trials of the castle had shown him the deepest truths of his heart, and now it was up to him to decide what came next. As the final mirror faded into darkness, Aelric turned away, his path clear before him. The battle was far from over, but now he understood what he was truly fighting for. Aelric pressed on, the cold weight of the castle's revelations heavy in his chest. The Hall of Mirrors was behind him, but its haunting reflections clung to his thoughts like shadows. His footsteps echoed through the cavernous passages of the castle, each step taking him deeper into its labyrinthine heart, where the final confrontation awaited. The air grew colder, and with it came a sense of dread, a presence that slithered through the walls like an unseen serpent. As he descended a spiral staircase, the light began to fade, swallowed by the encroaching darkness. Soon, Aelric found himself standing before a vast door, ornate, ancient, its surface covered in runes that pulsed faintly with a sickly glow. The whispers that had accompanied him throughout his journey were silent now, as if even they feared what lay beyond this threshold. The silence was oppressive, thick with an ominous weight that seemed to press against his very soul. With a deep breath, Aelric pushed the door open. Inside was a vast, shadowed chamber. At the center of the room, a throne of twisted iron and stone rose from the floor like the spine of some great beast. The room was bathed in a strange, flickering light that seemed to come from nowhere, casting long, distorted shadows across the walls. And there, seated upon the throne, was the entity. The figure was cloaked in darkness, its form shifting like smoke, as though it were not truly solid. Its eyes, 2 points of pale light, burned from beneath a hood of blackness, watching Aelric with a gaze that chilled him to his core. The air around it crackled with malevolent energy, and Aelric could feel the weight of its presence pressing against his heart, threatening to crush him under its power. "So," the entity whispered, its voice a rasping echo that seemed to come from every corner of the room at once. "You have come to face me." Aelric drew his sword, its blade gleaming faintly in the gloom. He could feel the power of the curse radiating from the entity, like a storm gathering just beyond the horizon. This was the source of the ancient curse that had plagued his kingdom for generations. The darkness that had woven itself into the very fabric of the land. It was not merely a spell, but a living force, a creature born from despair and betrayal. "I've come to end this," Aelric said, his voice steady despite the fear gnawing at his insides. "I've seen the truths this castle has shown me, and I know what must be done." The entity laughed, a low mocking sound that echoed through the chamber like the toll of a distant bell. "You think you understand, knight? You think you can defeat me with a sword and a heart full of regret?" It rose from the throne, its form expanding, growing taller, darker, Shadows spilled from its body, curling through the air like tendrils of smoke, filling the room with an oppressive darkness that seemed to swallow the very light. The temperature dropped, and Aelric could feel the chill seeping into his bones, making his sword feel heavy in his hand. "You are nothing," the entity hissed, its voice growing louder, more menacing. "You are but one man, mortal, flawed, bound by the chains of your own mistakes. What hope do you have against me, the embodiment of the curse that binds your kingdom?" Aelric's grip tightened on his sword. The witch's words echoed in his mind. "Not all battles are fought with blades. The battles you face inside will be of a different kind." He realized now what she had meant. The darkness before him was not just an enemy to be vanquished. It was a reflection of everything he had feared, everything he had refused to face within himself. The entity lunged, its shadowed form reaching out to envelop him. Aelric braced himself, his sword flashing as he struck at the darkness. But the blade passed through the shadows as though they were made of air. The entity's laughter filled the chamber once more, louder now, crueler. "You cannot defeat me with steel," it whispered. "I am your fear. I am your doubt. I am every choice you regret, every moment you've questioned your path. I am everything you've buried deep within your soul." Aelric stumbled back, his heart pounding in his chest. The shadows pressed in, wrapping around him like chains, tightening with each passing second. His sword felt useless in his hands, as though it were little more than a trinket in the face of this ancient, terrible force. But then, in the midst of the darkness, he remembered the mirrors. He remembered the faces of his fallen comrades, the memory of Ira, the vision of a future where he stood alone, victorious yet hollow. And he realized, with a sudden clarity, that this battle was not one of strength or skill. It was a battle of the heart. The entity fed on his fear, on his doubt, but it had no power over the truths he had embraced. Aelric dropped his sword, letting it clatter to the floor. The shadows surged forward, but this time he did not recoil. Instead, he took a step forward, his gaze fixed on the burning eyes of the entity. "I am not defined by my fears," he said, his voice firm. "I have made mistakes. Yes, I have regrets. But I am more than that. I am the sum of my choices, both good and bad. And I will not let you control me any longer." The shadows recoiled, writhing as though they had been struck. The entity hissed, its form wavering, flickering in the dim light. Aelric took another step forward, his heart steady, his mind clear. "I choose my own path," he said, his voice rising above the darkness. "I choose hope, even in the face of despair." The entity let out a final furious scream, and then with a blinding flash of light, it shattered. The darkness dissolved, leaving the chamber empty and silent once more. Aelric stood alone, his chest heaving with the effort of the battle. The curse was broken. But more than that, he had confronted the darkness within himself, and he had emerged victorious. The chamber fell into an uneasy silence after the entity's final scream. The darkness that had once suffocated the castle now dissolved into nothingness, leaving Aelric standing alone in the center of the vast room. His chest heaved with the effort of the battle, but it was not the physical strain that weighed upon him. It was the realization of what he had just conquered. His own fear, his own doubt, the shadows of his past that had haunted him for so long. He glanced around, expecting the walls to shift or for another trial to present itself. But the room remained still, empty, save for the faint light that now seeped through the cracks in the stone walls, a soft golden glow that hinted at dawn. Aelric knew with a deep certainty that the castle had shown him all it intended to. The curse had been broken, not by force of arms, but by the strength of his heart. Yet, as the quiet settled over him, a lingering question remained. What had the curse truly been? It had not been some external force, as he had once believed, but something much more insidious. The curse had woven itself into the fabric of the kingdom through fear, through regret, through the mistakes of those who had come before him. The castle had forced him to confront the truth that the real chains holding his land in darkness were the ones forged by the hearts of men, not the spells of sorcerers. With a deep breath, Aelric turned from the now vanquished throne and retraced his steps. The castle, which had once felt like a twisting labyrinth, now seemed to guide him with gentle ease, as though it no longer needed to test his resolve. The air was lighter. The oppressive weight that had haunted him throughout his journey lifted. The corridors no longer shifted in and out of reality. Instead, they remained solid, their walls bathed in the soft glow of morning light. He reached the grand hall of mirrors again, though this time the reflections did not haunt him. The mirrors stood silent, showing him nothing more than his own form, tired but whole, stronger than when he had first stepped into the castle's mysterious embrace. The whispers had ceased entirely, leaving only a quiet calm in their wake. As Aelric passed each mirror, he felt a strange sense of closure. He had faced the ghosts of his past, the faces of fallen comrades, the memories of love and loss, and emerged from the other side not unscathed, but changed. He had learned that the castle's trials were not meant to break him, but to teach him. The curse had been more than just a spell on the land. It had been a reflection of the darkness that lingered within himself and his kingdom. Finally, he reached the great doors through which he had first entered. They were no longer heavy and foreboding, but stood slightly ajar, as though the castle itself were granting him permission to leave. Aelric hesitated for a moment, turning back to look at the vast interior one last time. The invisible castle, once a place of legend and fear, now seemed almost peaceful, as if it had been waiting for this very moment, for him to break the curse and restore what had been lost. With a final nod to the castle, he stepped through the doors. The sunlight hit him like a warm embrace, the first true light he had felt in what seemed like an eternity. The forest that surrounded the castle was no longer dark and twisted. Instead, it was alive with the sound of birdsong and the rustling of leaves, bathed in the soft gold of the morning sun. Aelric breathed deeply, filling his lungs with the fresh air of the forest. The weight of the curse was gone, and with it, the oppressive shadow that had hung over the land. The path that led back to his kingdom was clear now, and Aelric began to walk, his steps lighter than they had been in days. He could feel the change in the air, as though the world itself had been renewed, as though the curse had lifted not just from the castle, but from the very soul of the land. The trees, once gnarled and ancient, stood tall and proud, their leaves shimmering in the sunlight like emeralds. As he walked, Aelric could not help but think of the witch. Her presence, though distant, had guided him through this journey, her riddles and wisdom offering him the path to salvation. He wondered if he would ever see her again, or if she had vanished into the shadows of the forest once her purpose had been fulfilled. But as he neared the edge of the forest, Aelric knew that this was not the end of his journey. The trials of the invisible castle had changed him, yes, but they had also given him a new purpose. He had seen the darkness that could take root in the hearts of men, and he understood now that his kingdom's true salvation lay not just in the breaking of the curse, but in healing the wounds that had allowed the curse to grow in the first place. The castle had tested him, had forced him to confront his own shadows, but it had also given him hope. Hope that he could lead his kingdom into a new era, one where fear no longer held sway, where the mistakes of the past could be forgiven, and where the future could be shaped by the light of understanding. As the gates of his kingdom appeared on the horizon, Aelric smiled, knowing that though the curse had been broken, his true work had only just begun.